To impress people, you can tie a nice fly. You really can. But to catch fish, you tie a fly that the fish will bite. That's a key. Hi, my name's Bruce Fyfe. I live on Vancouver Island, actually now in the Sayward Valley, just off the Salmon River. And I've been fly fishing now for well over 50 years. I started guiding in 1982, and in the fall of 1982, the fellow that I was working for asked if I knew anything about steelhead fishing, and my brother Dave and I had done quite a bit of steelhead fishing to that point. And I said yes, and I took him to the Gold River. His name was Wade Patterson. He's gone now, great guy, dear friend. And Wade and I and a couple of his kids went down near the bottom end of the Gold River, and I had my waders on, of course, and I'd come out quite a ways. It was in April. I'd walked too far out. I was too buoyant. I'm short, and anybody with short legs knows when you start getting a little too deep, you begin to float a little bit, and I stepped over a rock into a deep hole, and I went under, and I got sucked under, and I went down, I hit the bottom, I pushed up, and when I pushed up, I was in a current, kind of a back eddy at that point, and it was moving me in circles, and so I pushed up, I came out, and I looked, and there's my brother David standing on shore. He was guiding as well, standing on shore, looking at me, buckled over laughing. Down I went again, down the river, came back up again, and my brother Gordy happened to have driven up at the same time, saw what was happening. He stopped and was out of his vehicle. And when I came up the next time, I looked, and there's my brother Gordy standing up on the road, buckled over laughing. And down I went. I can't remember how many times I went up and down, but I was sure I was a goner. But thankfully, because I got pushed into a back eddy, it actually pushed me. It was deep water, but it pushed me back over where I could come up with enough gulps of air until finally I was able to get in close to shore. Finished guiding that day, soaking wet, catching lots of fish. Great day with Wade and his family. I started fishing as far back as I can remember. I'm sure I was fishing at 2 and 3 years old. That was just with a hand line. When I was about probably 12 or 13 years old, I was watching a fella fly fishing for bass at Beaver Lake just outside of Victoria, and he was hammering the bass, and it fascinated me because I'd always used bait. I'd go down the creeks and I'd get those little crawfish and hook them onto a hook, and if you got them anywhere near a bass, they'd hit it, right? And I thought that was the way to catch bass. But when I saw this guy, it was fascinating. And I just thought, I got to do that. And so I asked for a fly rod for Christmas. And my mom bought me just one of them old fly rods, cheap fiberglass fly rod and floating line. And I went out to Durant's Lake right after Christmas in a little rowboat. And shortly after casting, I probably had like a Tom Thumb, I think I was using, and laid it on top of the water. Couldn't cast very far, obviously, but laid it on top of the water, and up came about a 10 or 12 inch little cutthroat, and that was it. It sealed me. That's what I wanted to do. And so I would tie a feather onto a hook. I didn't know anything about vices and all the specialty stuff. I would just use whatever I could find and hook it up, and discovered that just about didn't matter what you used as long as you were matching what the fish were eating. So I'd try and catch a fish, see what they were eating, match what I was, it colors mostly, what I was seeing they were eating, and then go home and try and tie something as close as possible, and then trying to match it. I started fly fishing for steelhead around 1980, and the real reason that I was fishing in the rivers was primarily to catch the cutthroat that were coming in, and then I began to catch the odd steelhead, realized they weren't as hard to catch as I thought they might be, and then started to focus more and more on fly fishing. simply for steelhead. So I'll show you what I fish with. I won't be able to tell you the names of flies because I just tie what I like. I like to use. Again, fly fishermen, you observe what fish are feeding on, and I was fishing at, I think it was called Darkest Lake, and I was standing in the lake, on the lake shore, fishing with one of my other flies, and I looked, and there were literally hundreds of tadpoles going by, and some of them were coming up to the surface, relatively close to the surface, and I saw a brook trout come up and take that tadpole. So I went home and I thought, well, if they're eating them, I'm gonna try and match as close as I can something that will look close to a tadpole. And I actually tied it dry because I wanted to see them take it. I wanted to see the fish rise and take it, and they did. I caught numerous brook trout using that little black ant or tadpole imitation. I tied both. If you haven't Croneman fished, it is something that every fly fisherman needs to experience. But there's one guy that I have watched on television over the years, and there's a book called All Fishermen Are Liars. There's one guy that I know that's not like that, and his name is Brian Chan. That guy, if you get an opportunity to listen to him, to watch him and learn from him, he's the guy that you want to listen to. He knows what he's talking about, and he knows fish, he knows what they're feeding on, and he's a good teacher. Just from what I've learned from seeing him fish on television, I've watched what he's done, I've copied what he's done, and it works. So I've fly fished for over 50 years. Never got really good at it. I was never a really good fly fisherman, but I loved it, and I learned a lot, especially from a friend of mine, Francis Drake from Campbell River. He's a master fly fisherman, and he was the one that introduced me to the California Neal. I saw what he was fishing with. We fished we're near the mouth of Black Creek, and he was just hammering the coho as they were going by. We were fishing in relatively shallow water, maybe 4 or 5 feet of water, and we'd wade out and fish in 4 or 5 feet of water, and we could see the fish going by, and he was getting one right after another. At the end of the day, he showed me what he was using, which was the California Neal, and I tried to match it. The reality is that I had a relatively short shank hook, so I shortened up the length of the original California Neal. The fact that we were fishing in such shallow water, I thought I'm going to add a bead to it so that I can still use a floating line, and rather than what some of the guys were using, which was either a weight forward sinking line or just a full sink. And I found that worked really well. It just kind of turned the fly fishing around for me. Not steelhead, the coho, love the California Neal. It's a great fly. And the thing I like about fly fishing is you don't have to match what everybody else uses. You can come up with your own variations. You can see what works and then determine, given the conditions that you want to fish in, what you would like, how you would like to change a particular fly.